and all of those great things that I thank her for, Nancy Dwyer.
Thank you so much. I mean, I also want to thanks Ed for inviting me, and thank you Nina for inviting me to do the show. I think you're learning what a thing it is to mount one of my shows. Yeah. I always wish I made simpler art, but I'm so glad that you brought up both Linda and Michael Zwack, because they've both been on my mind a lot being here. You know, I met Michael when I was a senior in college, and we got together and were kind of blazing Buffalo, and it was a real Buffalonian. He really grew up here and really showed me this city in a way that I hadn't seen before, because I had just pretty much just been a student. So, you know, as a student, you're kind of a visitor. And Michael really knew the city. He took me to the best bars. You know, like, you know, these jazz bars, and everyone knew him. And I really, I have to say that I really credit him in a lot of ways with being an artist seriously. Like, I didn't know before that you could just be a complete romantic and just go for it. And that was his attitude, and I was like, oh my God. It was such a relief, because that's all I ever wanted to do, and I thought I would have to, like, be a nurse or something, you know, and then also make my artwork. And it was through this transition in my senior year of college at UB that I just decided to jump off the cliff, you know? And it was really very much with his help. So I moved to New York with him, and we started our careers there. And you know, I kept in touch. We were totally friendly. He had since gotten married to a wonderful woman, and I hadn't, you know, we weren't close in the last like 10 or 15 years, but we always kept in touch. And I was so sad to hear about his illness, but I was so lucky. One time when I was in New York, I guess it was early spring, I did go and visit him, and I was so glad I did, because he passed away like a week later, and no one knew he was going to do that. And so I got to do that, reconnect. And yeah, I guess I'm getting to that age where people pass, you know? And so I think about these people. So here I'm having all these flashbacks. And Linda, oh my God. When you said the word, Ed, you said the word open. And that's what I feel like. I feel like it was the Wild West when I was here. Like, we didn't know. I have to tell you, if anyone used the word career with art, we were really embarrassed. You know, like, there was no such thing as an art career in the early 70s. It was just, I don't want all that. I want to do this, you know, and it wasn't really formed. But because I found a community, I think community is like the most important thing in the world for artists, because it's such a lonely job. And you kind of feel like you're a crazy person unless there's someone else who is pursuing a similar path, and you get supported by that. And that's what happened to me in Buffalo. So incredibly seminal time for me. All right, so here I am. I'm Nancy Dwyer, and usually I start showing my work around in the 90s someplace, but because I'm here, I thought I would show this group of pictures that are before 1990. I'm really old, so I have like way too much work to show you. So I just wanted to show this as, this was a piece I think I showed in Hallwalls in 1980. So this is 1980. Like, I can't even figure out how many years ago that is. It's like a lot. What I can tell you about my thinking and also my fellow artists, we were coming out of conceptual, or heavily influenced by conceptual art, which basically, you know, the whole art world market was in the dumper at that time, right? There was no, because conceptual art, how do you sell an idea, right? So there was no idea of making money. I just had this magical idea that people should leave me alone and give me money. That persists today. It hasn't exactly worked out that way, but in terms of artwork, I was just trying to figure out how I was seeing. Like, what the hell am I doing here? And what's this, all this stuff around me, you know? And of course, at the time, print media was really dominant. You know, that whole other thing has happened since. So what I feel like all of us did was go, instead of resist popular culture, we just jumped into the belly of the beast. And that was our nature. That was like, I'm gonna go into this forest and try to make some sense of it for myself. And so the way that my thinking was to just take images, I collected images, and to and make them so simple and just line drawings such that I could start understanding the meaning of images in the world around me. So that's what I was doing. And little did I realize, it's kind of like the history of the written language, right? If you think about pictograms and Egypt and the development of the written language. So basically I was redoing that. These are big paintings. I think they're mostly annotated. This piece was in the Met in the Pictures Generation show. It's called Yoga Woman. So that's what I was doing, and I was thinking of using the language of advertising and labeling as an arena to express. This piece is called Two Popes Kissing. Well, it's called The Twin Towers, Two Popes. And it came from me reading an article by Jean Baudrillard that was about the American aesthetic, or the contemporary aesthetic, being all about there's always two of everything, with giving us the illusion of choice. You know, it's like, I'm free, I can choose between Coke and Pepsi. You know? And so I thought, what in the world is there only one of? There's only one pope. So I superimposed two pictures of a pope kissing. That was my, designed as a cigarette pack. And so this is one of my favorite pieces. This is from, and it's amazing how the world doesn't change. This is from the war in Afghanistan, the first one that like totally kicked ass on like the USSR in the early 1980s. And this is called War Boy, kind of doing the same thing. So these are pictures that are installed. I think this is probably from a show I did in Houston. So this is how this developed. So little by little, these pieces became more graphic and more dynamic as an object in the room. So what I'm getting to here is how my work developed into being three-dimensional. I studied painting. I never studied sculpture. It seemed too easy to me. But somehow, this is Dr. K. This is basically about the Mets in 1985. And what I was thinking at that point was, what do I like? Like everything in the world, like how one defines one, it's so easy to get your identity through resistance and through criticality. Like, but it doesn't seem smart to like stuff. Like to be a fan of something means you're stupid, you know? And so, wait, what do I like? I actually really liked going to baseball games and going to the Mets. I'm not going to talk about that. And so this was a seminal piece for me to actually take. So what came out of that was I started to have the titles first when I was designing my work, and use like these simple images to design it. And then I realized like let's cut out the middleman. You know, maybe it's just the word, the symbol. And so I started making these three-dimensional letters because also right now we're seeing this. It's right now as a photo, it's much happier being in this graphical space. We're used to seeing three-dimensional words pictured to us, but they're never really meant to be in space. They're just given this like objecthood through the three-dimensionality of their illustration. And I thought, let's reverse representation and get really stupid and make it as an object. So that got me going on something that I kind of haven't left. So I made this piece, Mean, which is actually called Me, Man, Men, Mean, in 1987. And this is just a piece called Me, that's solid, that's M from one point of view and E from the other, a painting from '88. This is straight, I redid a wall billboard that was for rugs, because all I saw was ooh. So I thought of something that had a lot of O's. This was from a poster when I went in New Mexico. I went to the museum in Los Alamos that talks about fusion and the bomb, and I just turned their algorithm into always right, never lie. As I go on, I'm starting to make, so that this is a plain Dadaist trope, right? To make something out of a material that lends meaning to what it is doing. So I made the CO2, I made skin out of these different veneers, and H2O as a giant pail. All right, so let me get rid of that. So that's like sort of like leading up to, let's try this one. Ooh. Let's view it full screen. All right. So you've seen that already. So I did this show at the in 2012. I just got this email from the curator at the Emily Fisher Landau Center, which is a private museum in Long Island City, asking me. Emily Fisher Landau had already owned like 10 or 11 of my pieces, and they were thinking of doing a bigger show with my work. So this was a great opportunity, so I did this. So here's the inflated ego. It's, I kind of couldn't not do this when I thought of it. It's like it's a little bit of I'm not usually that obvious, but I couldn't help it. So I made it really big. It's really big. And there's a version of that owned by the Birchville Penny Art Center. Here's the word body, much larger than one's own body. On the table is a set of encyclopedias. There's a little backstory to the encyclopedias. When I started to make money from my artwork, I thought, I always felt like I didn't really learn enough in college. And so I thought, I have enough money, I'm gonna buy a set of encyclopedias. And it's amazing the way they sell encyclopedias, like some guy has to come and talk to you. Like on the phone, I was like, I'll pay the money, just send them to me. They're like, no, somebody has to come to. So this guy comes to my studio. He's like, where am I? And he's like doing this whole sale job with this presentation. I'm like, every time he takes a breath, I'm like, okay, how much does it cost? I just wanted to get him out of there and get the encyclopedias. Anyway, I ordered the encyclopedias, and between when I ordered them and I got them, the Berlin Wall fell. So basically, a large percentage of the information in my encyclopedias was no longer true. And also, the guy called me up and asked me out on a date. So the whole thing was just so wacky. Anyway, so I had these encyclopedias, and then the internet comes and renders them kind of useless. So I had this set of really luxe Britannica, and lo and behold, I had this art idea to cut each one of the encyclopedia, each volume, into either a B, an L, an A, or an H. So it said blah, 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 blah. And so that's how that piece came about. It was really me having that. This is an installation shot of the show at Emily's. And the other way that I had started, because I always start on the computer, I took up teaching myself computer graphics in the late 80s. And so I also started to develop these ideas for patterns. I'm really interested in patterning. I'm kind of a closet math person. And so I started to develop these patterns. So this is the already dead wallpaper around these cloud forms that I made. And this is the not dead yet pattern around. And you see that sculpture is actually this part of the not dead yet graphic made three-dimensionally. So I kind of make things in lots of different ways. I'll have I'm always doodling on the computer. It's kind of where I go. And so lots of times things just end up being prints, or maybe an animation, or maybe a sculpture, or, they all go back and forth. I'm not tied to form. It's kind of incredible to me that our culture is still so stuck in almost 100 years ago. When I tell someone I'm an artist, they're like, what do you work in? As if I carve soap to such a high order that it's art. That's their idea of art, that if you do something well enough, it becomes art, which is just one of the definitions of art, as opposed to, it's kind of visual philosophy, and whatever it tells me to do, I do. So let's go from here. So here's a piece that hopefully we'll have finished installing. I got this idea. Here's the graphic on the right. And I got the idea for this from a Lotto ad. Where all the balls are bouncing around, you're going to win something. It's you're not going to win anything. And so I just thought, everybody's angry. It's a condition. It's true. And so I really liked having that as just kind of in the ether being presented with this graphic. And then again, I took something that was never really meant to be in 3 dimensions and actually made the balls. Each one is, it's a papier-mâché ball that's hand painted with the gradation of a shadow on it. And you know, the lettering is hand painted, which I, you know, for years my day job was graphics and display stuff. And then they're all hung in the air. So there's all kinds of like distance things, because you know, with the graphic, it's as if they're like really far away, and some of the smaller ones are closer and whatnot. So I've been driving Nina and Peter, the installation expert, in installing this. So this is at the gallery. And this is one of the applications of one of my patterns, which comes from going around galleries in New York. And I always get the press release when you go to a show in New York. You know, just they have them all printed up. And it's some of the worst art critical writing, because it's always like somebody just out of school trying to obfuscate and make it sound as smart as possible. Anyway, this one said, "This artwork is about thoughts and things." Oh my God, that's great. So I made this pattern that says thoughts and things over and over again. Okay, this piece is called The Thinking Machine, and this is really about Vermont. I wanted to make something in the tradition of like sort of the Vermonty craft movement. And so it's like a churn. And I discovered that you could find an if, let's say I don't have the other side, you can find an if on the back of the then. And so if you grind this sentence, it says if then, if then, if then. And that's thinking, right? So it's called The Thinking Machine. This piece, it's still there. I should go get it. It's on someone's property. I made this piece out of parts of an old barn. It's called Lost Past, so it's the word lost turning into the word past. And as it's lived there, it's kind of like melted into the environment. One of the things about getting a teaching job, okay, I talked about my history, but in the early 2000s, it occurred to me it might be good to get a job in academia. So I set about to do that. I went to graduate school at NYU. I learned computer in interactive telecommunications is my degree. So like, why learn what you already know? I didn't want to get an MFA. And I had this, because I was self-taught on the computer, and most of my original, like Cindy and Robert and all those people, they weren't into computers. I didn't have anybody to talk to. And so I had this like sort of golden idea of, if I was a young artist today, that's the world I would go into. And come to find, when I went to this graduate program, they all wanted to be artists showing in galleries. So it was kind of like I kind of like shed my identity as an artist and went in, and it was like kind of a dead end in that way, but I learned a lot of stuff. Anyway, I did get this teaching position at the University of Vermont, at which I'm a professor now. And what I can tell you, the kind of booby prize of the whole thing, number one is students, because I get to see through eyes from a generation. I really think we all see different as we go along. These are people who did not have cell phones. You know? It's like they see the world really, their idea of timing is different, their idea of visuals are different. So I learn a lot from them, and I love them for that, and it helps me. The other thing it afforded me, it was by not having to tie my livelihood to artwork sales, I was able to be much more experimental. And so one of the ways I did that, I've done like 5 or 6 big collaborations with people. So this is one of them with a painter I know named Steve Buddington, and we had studios next to each other. And one day he made this painting, and I had one of my patterns up on the wall, and I took his painting and I put it on the wall. I said, let's do a show of this. So that's what this show is. It's the backgrounds with his work in front of it. So that's kind of a juncture where the patterns, that's the painting that changed everything for me. Whoops. So I just wanted to talk about doing that. Okay. At the time also with patterns and multiplicity, I did a few shows. This is, it's kind of type design. I like the idea of having a message in the absence of something. So I don't know if you can read this, but if you squint at it, you might be able to see the words entitled to what. That also was inspired by my students. Just the idea of what one deserves. And I'm starting to think, I'm seeing my students, talking to my students, and I'm realizing, wow, the absolute most dominant identity that we all have, and I share it, is as consumer. And what is a consumer? A consumer is a passive character who is entitled to choice. And that is so different than an active character. So that really kind of changed my world. I did a version of this with actual objects that I collected from people. This is like 48 feet long. And so before I go on to expect delays, so that really kind of changed things. It's like, this is why I'm attracted to using these graphics and everything, because it's some kind of like weird, neurotic maybe, desperation, like desperate approach to using the graphics and the language of advertising and taking back the power, and I kind of didn't even realize I was doing that, but I kind of realized that through things. I want to close this for a second and just show you, where are you? Oh. So I may also, this is just from driving, but it's very, it's kind of fits in with this stuff. So I'm driving along in my car because I drive a lot. I love to drive. And I see this sign that says expect delays. I'm like, that's really philosophical. Like, how can you expect delays? And so from the stuff I learned in grad school, I'm also really interested in using time in a way that's non-narrative, in a sculptural way. So I made this set of animations that are very rudimentary, but that take, I think it's 15 seconds, for the word expect to turn into the word delays. And so it forces you to stand there and be in that situation whilst you're viewing it. That's the whole idea on that. There's a version of this piece in the show that you can see the first version. I had these little, those little DVD players, and so now I was able to just use little pads now, so it got prettier. See, so now it's like, like it doesn't say anything. And I guess it's 30 seconds, unless I'm just thinking that time is going really slow. So, yeah, it's like, what is time? Also, by the way, the big difference between painting, prints, 2D art, and 3D art is the element of time. You cannot take in a three-dimensional piece of artwork from a shot, right? You got to walk around it. So it creates that. I'm kind of all over the place here. Tell me when I've talked too long. I'm going to close you. Yes, I am going to close you. Don't save. Okay. This was that guy. And I am going to pretty quickly go back to, wait a second, just put full screen mode, and I can get us to where we're going. There's all these versions of things. So this was one of the first designs for this piece, can you guys read it? This was the only piece I made the year I got divorced. And people would say, don't say that about yourself. And I'm like, believe me, I'm not. And so the first like sculptural version are these balls, you know, like the balls that little kids play in, they dive into. I didn't like the colors they came in, so I changed the colors of them all and made this big, see, it's pretty big, this big installation. There is, I can't leave Selfish Idiot. It's like one of my favorite content pieces. So there's a version of that in Nina's show that I did with Venetian blown glass balls. So the idea with that is it's so luxurious and beautiful, and so you like love it, and then it insults you. It's kind of like the For Dummies books. Like, do I want to buy a book that's telling me I'm stupid? Like, I've never bought any of those books. They make me mad. Okay, that's just an old painting. I don't know why that's there. And this is one of my, another print that just from far away looks like a Laura Ashley print or something, and it's just saying like, all right already, all right already. I'm not going to talk about that. These guys. Okay, this is a piece that was at the Birchfield for years, I guess. I thought it was going to be a temporary installation, and it again is this morphing type. There were, what it even says in it, 12 word sets that morph into from one to the other, kind of a la tire tracks. It's basically a long, slow, simple poem. This is one of the earlier paintings when I was still playing with just using 3D type. This is actually newer. I've used this in, I have a pattern design that goes with this, and it's like, I don't like what I like. I kind of realized that about myself. You know how you like are really attracted to things that you know are really bad taste? This is a piece that Emily Fisher Landau owns. This was a piece I made at a residency at the Kohler Foundation. You know, they're really heavy cast iron that are brass plated. I mean, it was all about casting, and so I didn't know much about casting, so I would just go to like Walmart and buy these like plastic things and make casts, you know, make molds out of them to cast them. Here's a set of chairs that I made. They're called the Laughing Chairs. This is a pretty old piece. One of the reasons I have this piece in, it's one of those straight, there's actually the Albright owns a piece that does the same thing that says kill yourself in this like happy type. It was when it was just kind of the form and the content are so at odds that I remember one person actually saying, you know that I Love New York poster you made? It's like, and this is the goes with a, yeah, I'm not gonna, we already talked about Good Move before. This was just an early piece that I still love that came from like a Wiggs catalog. I put a Wiggs catalog and one of those like nature, I love those little nature books that are all illustrations, so it had the bats. And I can't defend myself over this other than people think like, is that a Cindy Sherman? It's like, no, it's not. This is just a sculpture that has the word off under, so it's on a piece of mirrored stainless. I've made a few versions of this, of just, again, walking, you know, in the Lower East Side and seeing all these garbage cans. I'm just thinking, ooh, because I'm thinking of everything in terms of letters. So I decided to make the F and the D. This is a set of chairs. It's meant to go around a table. So it says family member, so it says sacred family member secret, or sacred secret family member, right? So you can see like the different planes have I was very well funded at this point. This piece is actually the sculptural version of a painting that I have at Nina's. I did kind of a sentence. I loved the sentence. It comes out of a song. It says, I forget the whole sentence. Anyway, it's like deep, deep, deeper down into the comfort of our own narcolepsy. That's the sentence. I was just obsessed with the sentence. It's by this band called A3, the same people who did the like Sopranos theme. So I just love deep, deep, deeper down. And so I made, this is just a bunch of just pieces of wood. Well, there's one of the deepers. No, it isn't. That is the graphical version of the same thing that the other one was. So that's a series. I've just always loved that series, so we have that up. This is a piece that I made a long time ago called Shadow of a Doubt, and it is, it's a shadow of a doubt. I've always wanted to do something else with. This is an installation shot of a show I did in '94. These guys are this box that I broke up the words despair, destroy, desire, I probably have it all in here. Oh, right, they either have des or Troy, pair, or tiny, right? So it's just desire, despair, destroy, des. And I ended up using that concept in a swatch watch that I designed. So it would say, you know, like the hands were des, and so you could like look and see whether you were at destroy, desire, despair, or you were in destiny. So that's what's noteworthy about this. This piece, I still have, like, it's not a big question why. It's the word white turning into the word trash, which I just kind of saw as a self-portrait, but I wasn't trying to be mean to anybody. So yeah, one of the things I always do is I count letters. So I have all these lists of things, and then I realize they have these like crossword dictionaries. Have you ever seen those? With numbers of letters, and it's all online now, so I'm like, oh, it's a total cheat sheet for me. Anyway, this is Evil Twin. They're like, barbells. And Aging Punks was, again, thought of it as a sort of self-portrait in '96 that are just, aging, turning into punks. So what I want to do is just show you, I was going to show you all the public work, but I think I'm talking too much. All right, I'll show you the public work fast. I'm telling you, I got a lot of work. It's like I'm old.
Gold mine. Gold mine.
It's just a lot to keep track of. Let's see, we want to go full screen mode. It's always hard to do this stuff in front of people. Okay. Early work was it was for a high school, so I did always, sometimes, often, and never as benches in the courtyard, so they could answer their own questions. And I did these highway things, which I think you've seen a few times. I did a series of paintings this way too, but I got the content. I basically had plain old VCT, vinyl composition tile, which is the best stuff in the world. I mean, that stuff lasts that's why it's everywhere. because it lasts for like 40 years. And it's always been made from recycled stuff. It's like one of the great materials of the universe, and it comes in all these different colors. But I did a presentation at the high school and told them the hallways is your turf. What do you say while you're in the hallways? You know, so I got all this content from, some of it was really, you know, lewd, and I couldn't put it on the thing. But most of it, I loved ring, 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 what's up, see you later, were the white ones. And so you can see there's, you know, I had to edit a lot. But that's, you know, and I smashed the type, and I had it custom cut, you know, out of yellow and put in. And so then it was just a plain installation. So there's like 1,400 feet of it. And there's a wonderful, I don't have the copy right now, but there's a book that, I forgot. I'm just forgetting the man's name who used to run the public art program in New York City. He did a book, and there's this great little essay that one of the students wrote years after, talking about how people talk about it and they wonder like who made that, and how in the world do you get to make something like that, you know? And I just love it. It's the guy in the middle who wrote it, and I just love that. That's so gratifying to me, that it's active in the world. And that's the beauty of making public art, is that it's pretty hard to do anything that's not just decorating the world, because there's so many like stakeholders in all of it. And but I also made these giant granite sentences in Cleveland. Who's on first? I thought of that like the first day they asked me to do it. You know, it's outside the Jacobs field. Is it still called Jacob? They always change the name of these fields because people pay a lot of money for naming rights. And on the other side is Meet Me Here outside of the basketball arena. And it's also where the subway comes up. But they're huge. You can see from the scale, they're like 60 feet long. Each one of these letters is 2 to 5 tons of granite. And it was an experience because also it was funded in part by Gordon Gund of the Gund family, because he's from Cleveland, and he was going blind at the time, so I made it out of foam core, you know, and he felt the piece, which was just, I loved that. He was such a nice man. Anyway, so the scale of this, the guys who installed this were such like hard, you know, crane guys. They couldn't talk to me because I was female. It's like I had a male assistant, and we would literally stand, and they would talk to the assistant, and the assistant would say the thing to me, and then I would say the thing back. You know, it was like some other world. But it's still there. I mean, granite. That's why people make things out of granite. It's kind of too bad about, I went to the place with the granite, and it's like almost all of, you know, the machinery that made it, it's all diamond cut, powered by computer. You know, I basically just gave them outlines, and they put like a big rock on something that just kind of moves little by little to make a curve. Amazing technology, and most of it is still used for memorials. You know, it's like, wow, why don't we like take hold of this? So that's it installed. This is another piece similar. I actually also made in Cleveland. I'm really big in Cleveland. That's the word things turning into the word change. And it's just there are benches along Euclid Avenue, like that. And which can also be read, change things. So you can read it either way. This is a piece that's very subtle. It was in Philadelphia, where I, instead of actually decorating the halls of all these courtrooms, this is outside of all the courtrooms, I just describe these pastoral scenes. So some people can see it as like kind of nasty, because it's it's kind of it's kind of in contrast to the situation that most people are in when they're waiting to go into a courtroom. Or I saw it as a take on, the role of artwork in most public places as being something that's like, oh, that makes me feel good. And this piece is so weird. I made this piece before the World Trade Center thing. It's 911, and it was kind of about the idea of 911 being the central place that you can call, and the community working together to help you. So there's something very strange about, and the words, is there another one? Yeah. So it's the letters 911 using the John Donne poem, that's me and the guy who was installing. No man is an island entire of itself. So there's something kind of chilling to me about that. I made that, it's 911, and I made it like 3 years, or 10 years actually, before the World Trade Center came down on 911, which is almost now. So that's kind of weird. I also made a piece called Inhale, Exhale. The subtext of this, I like the idea of making a building seem like a living thing. So I like the idea of it having an inhale. I wanted the two pieces to be at two different doors. And the subtext being that everyone smokes cigarettes outside of these buildings. And to kind of talk about that. But shut up. So, go away. Wait a second. Oh. So I also just wanted to show you, if we're talking about public art, that I did this piece in Cleveland again, because like I said, I'm big on Cleveland. Come on. Hold on. All right, it's not gonna, oh, I see, we're stuck on that. Anyway, I made this big mural in Cleveland, and it's the words, "What are you waiting for?" in 11 languages. I got basically all of the nationalities of everyone who goes to Case Western University, and did versions of that question in the different languages, and also proportionate to how many people were there. And it was just kind of a great installation. And then the other thing I wanted to show you I made in Boylington is I made some bike racks. They're big on bikes in Burlington that just say O2. And so they haven't been installed yet, so I just have these, they're metal, so they look like that. And it's so funny because this is a photograph. Doesn't it look like a 3D rendering?
Yes.
Like they look more like the 3D rendering than the 3D rendering. So that's weird. I also just wanted to quickly show you one of, I showed you that video of the expectolays. Well, I made this video way before that, also as kind of an idea of a portrait. This was while I was in grad school. I made this when I was teaching myself 3D programming. So if you watch it, it's the word wannabe turning into the word has been. And so it's kind of wry, but it's kind of also about how hard it is to be, like to be now. And it's funny, I made that in 2002, And it has taken many years of that kind of like, I've never shown that. It's kind of a sketch. That's kind of how I think. It's kind of this sketch that I have. And just this spring, what I did was I took the halfway point between wannabe and has been and made the objects. So that's now. You can't read it. You don't know what's going on. It's kind of like now. And just made these things, and then painted the wall behind it to copy the animation. So I just wanted to show this. It's not in the show because there was all kinds of, these pieces got damaged and I wasn't able to fix them, but just somehow it kind of brings together like the way I think. That there's like these things that I've made before that I'm thinking about, and sometimes it takes like 10 or 15 years before an object comes out of those to make sense, for it to like completely turn into something. You know, they used to have, I don't know if you guys remember on David Letterman, they used to have this great skit called Is It Anything? You know? And him and Paul, the band leader, somebody would like juggle something. And they'd go, nah, that's nothing. Or, yeah, that's something. That's kind of what being an artist is like. Like, it's like you just make this stuff and it's like, could be nothing and it could be something, you know? And so for me, it's like I'm just used to now, I have all of the stuff that I've done, and sometimes it bubbles up and it becomes something. It's like, oh, that's not just a sketch anymore, that's something, you know? And I've often noticed that I don't make an artwork until it seems like it already exists. Like it seems like my idea of it is a memory of the existence of it. And so sometimes that fermentation process takes years. So this whole idea of like art as career, you know, and outputting and all that stuff, it's like, I don't know how you negotiate that when this is the priority, you know? So I just feel really lucky that I've found ways of just having a roof over my head to be able to indulge this and see it through. Like that's, to me, you know, these days it's really easy to be cool because the world is so not cool, you know? But to be like cool and also have a roof over your head if you're not, you know, I didn't have any net. I didn't know about anybody taking care of me. To still kind of be able to do that, it just seems more, being an artist to me seems more and more radical as I get older, as a choice for a lifestyle. And I feel more and more lucky that I'm also like, you know, I always say when things get rough, I get really practical. And, you know, that I've sort of figured out how to live and still be able to see this stuff through. So I'm just really grateful. See, I didn't know what I was going to say today. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Questions? I did talk too long.
No, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and phrase it, you know, okay. It's to do with your public art. And I was just, Ed and I travel a lot, we go to museums a lot. We were just in Philadelphia this weekend, Museum of Art, and there were thousands of people there enjoying the art. I'm a big read the text person, especially with contemporary art, okay? Just to sum it, my question up is, in your public art installations, what kind of, you know, text, explanation? Do people need it? Do they want it? What's your idea about that? You know, because
I think that you have to make things that work on many levels.
yeah.
That's, you know, and I think that also comes, I think there's a class thing going on for me with that, because I grew up in a very working class environment. I don't know how I became who I am, or like, I was always an artist. It doesn't make any sense. So, but I do feel like a loyalty to make things accessible
Of course.
and smart at the same time.
So, you know, in Buffalo, we've started public, you know, there's a public art all over, da-da-da. We have the Buffalo News, great critic explains things in the news. But I'm wondering, all these people who stream by or, who, you know, experience it, just like the Philadelphia Art Museum, they're not reading the text. They don't know the artists. I don't care about that. You know what I mean? Like, it's good that they're there, that it's public. And
I do, you know, I don't know.
I heard your answer. Sorry, I don't mean to be loud.
So what's the question?
What more can we do? I guess is my bigger question to say.
I think if you're a
Let's
really
engage-
good artist,
let's
it can
engage.
work on a bunch of levels. Like, look at Cindy's work, you know, dresses up, oh, that's all her? You know what I mean? You know, anybody can get that.
As an
You know?
educator, I want people to get it. I want them to read.
Oh, I don't care about other people in that way.
Okay.
I can't afford it. You know, because every time I think I know what other people are thinking, I'm wrong, right? I'm just in my own little movie.
You're not wrong, you're right. Thank you very much for this talk, I really got a lot out of it.
Thanks. Yeah.
When you show the whole range of your work and you look back at your earlier work, are there things that you kind of revisited where an idea that you had that maybe was 5, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and now that you have more abilities and skills from the technical
Yeah,
stage?
you know, there's that thing about making where you don't know what you're doing, and I definitely have the experience that, I have these instincts that have taken me places that I don't know about till after, you know? So that like executive function brain thing, it's like I've learned to let go of that a little bit. It's not as smart as it thinks it is, you know? And yeah, and so then I go back and I look at things and I say, that whole, like a lot of what I was just talking about, the whole class thing, I didn't realize that was going on in my work, that there was this kind of political thing on that going on in my work from the start, that I just thought it was my adolescent anger, you know? But you discover it. It's all about just making. Just make it anyway. Just don't stay in the idea. There is something about it stops the moment, it exists outside of you, and it's there whether you're there or not. There's like really a magic to that. You know, because I got so into all the screen-based stuff, like when I went to grad school and stuff, and it really showed me the power of the object, the discrete object, this thing that's in the room, whether I'm there or not. There's a magic that happens from that I learn from. I mean, I always tell students, your art is smarter than you are. You know, do what it tells you to do. You know, and you got to stay open to that. There's an intelligence we all have, no matter what. It doesn't have to even be about making art. We are smarter than we are. You know what I mean? And it's just like letting go and letting that come in. So, does that answer your question? Yeah.
I'm just wondering about the relationship between you as the brains behind this operation and the people that fabricate the work, and what kind of foggy areas might exist.
It's all about finding the right people.
I was wondering if you have people that you kind of use over and over and trust.
Well, I did, you know, I've gone through many different, I mean, I'm less well-funded. I mean, I used to, in the early 90s, I had people willing to fund making the work before it was made. And I definitely made some mistakes about scale and stuff then. I give architects and designers a lot of credit because they, everything hinges on that. But, yeah, mostly, I tend to shy away from the MFA fabricators. I call them, because they know more than I know. And it's not just about control, it's just about valuing things. I really like knowing how things get made. Most of the time, most things I make, I've tried to do it myself first. I feel like I'm a pretty good woodworker and fabricator because I feel like I have to get to know the process. It's always really scary to make something out of something I've never made anything out of before and have somebody else do it because I don't really know the materials. So that's one thing, but mostly it's like you kind of can tell. There's been like when I had that big ego made, I made a few cold calls to people who make big balloons. The first time I made it, it was with the same people who make the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade balloons. Because I've learned, since then there's that, the forced air technology of, like Santa Claus on your lawn. Right. That's the newer ones. But it was a big helium thing. And I could just tell I could work with these people right away because they're like, oh my God, that's such a great idea. We got to make that too. You know what I mean? It was like they totally got into it. And so if somebody comes on board, then it's golden. So it's really like that. I've definitely, with metal fabricators, I've had all different experiences. I've had people who get into it, who I like, and then there's, people who just kind of crank it out, and don't understand it all. So, it's a conversation. It's just like everything, you find your people.
A related question about Josh Baer, the relationship you have. When an addition is made, are there 40, for example, are there 40 knee blocks and are there 40 bright ideas?
Did I make 40 bright ideas?
Well, I think that's an addition of 15.
Yeah, that's the last. The me blocks were actually, I didn't make a dime from those. That was actually to benefit the new museum. The new museum used those and they made like a couple of $100,000 off of them.
Wow. And so Josh Baer was the one that manufactured those? Or?
Well, the new museum footed the bill, the fabrication bill. Because they're solid mahogany, they're gorgeous. But usually the additions, some of the small additions I just do myself, but the bright idea, Josh, and it was funny with that because we thought it was a big flop. He took it to like some art fairs and and then all of a sudden they all got bought up. It's like, I don't understand. I could never sell out because I don't know what people like. It's always a surprise to me.
A question about back to the money thing that you just mentioned. What's your view of perception of feelings about the way the gallery scene has changed from late 80s, 90s to now?
It sucked then, it sucks now, just in different ways.
How does it suck now different than it did when it sucked?
It definitely used to be more organized, because there used to be like real stables, like gallerists had and they would work with an artist for their whole career. And that's really, except for, now it's like big box or not, it's kind of gone like there's no middle market sort of. And now it doesn't seem like artists are tied to one gallery. They'll show at a lot of galleries, so they kind of end up having to do their own business. So they're more like independent agents. I'm kind of a terrible business person, so I always say to young artists, just do it different than I did it. Because I can't give you good, I am not proud of it, but it's so not my concern that it's like some other world to me. I don't get the money art thing. Like they don't, like I've sold things for like 20 or 30 grand. I think, a Toyota or that? I'd buy a Toyota. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make any sense to me, you know? So, yeah. Yes.
Question for you. So it seems like you're pretty comfortable with different materials based on what the subject or the words end up being. You choose maybe the end material based off of that. But is there anything that you've been eyeing that you haven't forayed into, that you're interested in trying?
Yeah, I want to, I'm really looking forward to, I'm going to have a sabbatical soon. And I really want to really explore 3D printing as a means of making parts to a whole.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I can really see, but I just really need some time for it to develop. And casting, you know, then maybe casting or something. Yeah.
Yeah, as somebody, I mean, I just really went back to grad school to work with a different type of technology. How do you kind of contend with, I don't know, I mean, it seems like you kind of have an approach that you're comfortable with, but how do you contend with not wanting to keep up with every new piece of technology to make different types of art that comes out? Because that's...
Yeah, I used to feel that kind of pressure, and
Yeah.
now I just kind of had I kind of don't care. It's just, you know, it's just, yeah. I mean, I'm always interested in the new. I've never, like the same thing with, you know, digital technology. It just always seemed like, especially at the beginning, it was such an issue. It's like, why does this have to be an issue? Why can't this just be another thing added to the toolbox? You know, why do I have to be pro computers or anti-computers? You know what I mean? Like, why can't it just be another thing in the world that does stuff? You know, like nobody is like pro pencil. You know? Yeah. Yeah, I guess they are, yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Like it was like such a strong, it's like I always had to resist the defense of that stuff because it's, and I did kind of go into that world and, you know, I was like the old chick who was a bad programmer, you know, when I was in grad school. But you know what? I had the good ideas. Like we always worked in little, you know, it was always collaborative because it's a lot of work to program. You know, I like programmed my old sewing machine to like beat on the head of something according to the amount of sound that came out of a soap opera. That's like was one of my projects. And so I came up with that idea, and then I had like these younger people around me that could do all that programming, you know? And so they wanted to work with me because I could always think of some stupid idea, like some goofy, like, but they didn't have the ideas for content that I had. And I mean, I had to learn Java, and like I had to learn a bunch of stuff, which I instantly forgot. But you know, it's what it was. It was an experience for me of looking under the hood, like I was talking before, like looking under the hood and seeing how this stuff, like what's really going on here. It's not magic, you know. It's like I've taught computer art classes so many times, and kids are always like, "Well, it didn't do that for me." It likes you. It doesn't like me. You know, it's like there is no it here. There's somebody who wrote the language of that program. So you're talking to a programmer. You know, like the menu or the tool might not be in a very good spot. You might have a problem with that. But that's all that's going on here. You know, it's just a bunch of algorithms. And so I learned that, you know, what was under there, even though I'm not versant in it. So yeah, I don't feel like I need to keep up. And plus I think now it's like, it seems like the big thing to me that seems now is mobile, right? I think iPhones are changing our world just as much as air travel and cars did. Like huge, huge, huge change. Huge way of thinking about what your body is and how, but in terms of the technology, all apps, you know what those are? They're like little filters in other programs, right? They're just like mini parts of other programs. They're not that advanced, really. Don't get me started. Thank you. Thank you very much.